everyone. Welcome to the 50 States Highpointing podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and the Highpointer we're speaking with today is Shannon from Illinois. Shannon, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So Shannon is a 50-state Highpoint completer. She is also a board member of the Highpointers Club, and she has been highpointing for how many years now?
28 years,
Wow.
I think.
And
Yeah.
she recently returned from an Everest Base Camp trek in Nepal. So
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear all about it. But before we get into everything, why don't you tell listeners a little bit about how you got started in the outdoors and what got you highpointing?
So I started getting out into the outdoors with my dad, actually. So he's a big climber, big hiker, big camper. I was part of the Girl Scouts, but mostly what we did was like arts and crafts. My brother, who's 3.5 years older than me, was a Boy Scout, and my dad was the troop leader. So actually what he did was whenever he could, he would just bring me along. And then he would also, so like I went whitewater rafting. One of my friends came with the Boy Scouts. I went hiking with the Boy Scouts. And so kind of grew from there. And then as I got older, we took trips outside of the Boy Scouts too. Just me, my dad, and my brother.
Yeah. And, I was in Girl Scouts. My two brothers were in Boy Scouts. And like the stuff that they did was always just a little cooler.
Yes. And they would go like whitewater rafting, they'd go hiking, they'd go camping, and then we'd make a pin. And I'm like,
I know.
It's cute, but
I got to milk a goat. I remember that.
Oh, that sounds like fun.
Yeah. We always just, I also grew up in Illinois, and I just remember going up to Wisconsin a lot on Girl Scout trips, like camping or something, which is cool too.
Yeah.
I'm sure Girl Scouts has changed a lot in the past, 25 years since I've been in it.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope they're getting out and doing more outdoor stuff.
Mm-hmm, for sure. So you started highpointing with your dad. Did your brothers go with you?
Yeah, my brother, I was 12, so my brother was I think 16, and we went out to South Dakota and did Blackout Peak out there. I've actually done that peak 4 or 5 times. It's actually a very delightful peak. I highly recommend.
Yeah. So why South Dakota? Why was that your first one?
I think so. We took a trip out there to go to the Black Hills and see Mount Rushmore, and then there's also Wind Cave and Jewel Cave out there, and then it's pretty close to Devil's Tower. So we were just taking a trip out to South Dakota, and then I think we ended up hiking that. I don't think my dad was part of the Highpointers Club at that point yet. I don't think he was highpointing per se yet.
So what came after Blackout Peak?
So I think actually the next one we did was actually Gannett Peak.
Oh.
Out in Wyoming. I was 14, and we went with the Skinner brothers, who no longer operate anything anymore.
Okay.
And we did summit. Gannett Peak, I've heard, can be a really rough summit. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad that we got it. And it was an interesting. So it's a glaciated peak. It is snow and ice, crampons, ice axe. We ended up being delayed because one of the guys in our group, he was an older guy who still smoked. So he would stop on the glacier and then be smoking.
No.
I'm not kidding. And then I think the lead guide was hesitant to turn him around. And finally my dad went up to him and was like, hey, look, he's not going to make it. You got to turn him around. So they turned him around. The rest of us went up. But then I did actually fall. I was roped up, but then my dad did the self-arrest, and then it was like this, I think it was our maintenance guy that was leading us, and then he did a belay. I had a little freak out moment after that, but I was also 14, but then we hiked out just fine. It is some of the most, just the hike in is probably some of the most beautiful scenery that I can ever remember seeing in the Wind River Range. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
Everyone has said that about Gannett Peak. They said
Yeah.
it's a long hike, but it's very beautiful. And I usually ask podcast guests the question, if you could redo another peak, which one would it be? And they say Gannett just because it was so beautiful.
Yeah. I kind of want to just hike in and go maybe fish at one of the lakes, you know. Um, but yeah, it was absolutely gorgeous.
Wow. So 14 years old and you summited Gannett Peak. That's pretty impressive.
Yes.
So where did you learn crampon and ice axe skills and glacier skills?
So we learned it there when I was 14. I didn't do my next glaciated peak until 2018, I want to say. 2017. So like between then like ended up relearning skills. So me, my dad, and brother took a trip out to the Pacific Northwest, and we went with Alpine Ascents on a guided kind of course. We did like a private course because I couldn't go to whatever course they had scheduled. And they went out and taught us all ice climbing, snow skills, snow climbing skills, all that kind of stuff. Up on Mount Baker, and then we summited Baker. And then the three of us went and just did Rainier on our own then.
Okay.
Yeah, so we felt comfortable with our ice climbing skills it's not ice climbing, but like our glacier travel skills, and then went on Rainier.
So how long has your dad been a climber?
He's been climbing a long time. I don't know specifically. I'm sure, so I know my grandpa used to take my aunts and uncles and him out west to go like hiking and camping and stuff like that, because we had to take a picture in the Powder River Pass in Wyoming, because that's where him and I think his brothers and sisters took a picture. So he started like hiking and outdoor stuff when he was little.
Okay.
So he's the much better rock climber than me, for sure. I do some rock climbing, but after COVID, I quit the gym, so I need to join a gym back again, so that way I can start rock climbing again. But
Yeah.
but he's the much better rock climber than me, for sure.
Do your brothers still continue to go in the outdoors and high point even?
Yeah, so my brother, I think he's a little jealous of me being a completer now. My dad's actually, so he just needs some southern ones for high pointing, and then Denali and Hawaii. And then my brother also, he needs those, and then also some in the Northeast. So he needs like Marcy and I think Vermont. A few of those, but so they're still high pointing. My brother's an engineer though and works long hours, so he doesn't I work my schedule out to be able to hike and climb. I think he just doesn't have as much time.
After Wyoming, what came next? And when did you start to go off on your own and do your own high points and decide I'm going to do all 50?
So after Wyoming, I think it was I think it was the next year we tried for Granite Peak in Montana.
Okay.
We're not successful.
Okay. Was this also guided?
No. So initially we went up so there's many different routes on Granite. Most of them come up the Froze to Death Plateau. This one we were coming up Huckleberry Creek. We needed a lot more time. Didn't go. I think it was the next year we attempted again and went up to the Froze to Death Plateau and got snowed on. So we had to turn around because we were unprepared for snow on that mountain. And then I think like we would generally do some hiking and camping, but I didn't pick up like we didn't pick up the Granite Peak Misery Fest again until I think I was either in med school or college, and we attempted again. And that time we got all the way up to the snow bridge, and the weather looked absolutely awful. We were like, we decided to turn around because the weather just it looked like it was going to jump on you. We didn't want to be on the upper mountain, and then of course it turns into a beautiful bluebird day.
Oh gosh.
So we turned around that time, and then it was during my third year of medical school, or fourth year. I was in my fourth year, and we finally went and summited. And that time it hailed on us. That mountain has always snowed on us, hailed on us, because we went a few years ago too. Because it was just me, my dad, and one of my dad's friends. My brother couldn't go at that time, so we took my brother back. 2021. It was 2021. And even that time, coming down off the upper mountain, that mountain hailed on us.
No.
It's a vengeful mountain. She doesn't like it when people summit. She's going to hail on you. So,
Yeah. So what time of year, what month, what was the date range that you did those summit attempts?
so it was all end of July into the beginning of August. For the most part, I mean, and there, I think, so Granite Peak is known to be kind of like one of those peaks that can be difficult. It was actually the last of the 50 state high points to be summited because people couldn't find their way through the upper cliffs. So all the times we've gone is during that time period.
Oh, then, all right. So that was in your third year of medical school.
Yeah. And then
that was high point number 3.
I think we did a few others between then. So like when we drove out one time, we went to White Butte in North Dakota.
Okay. Like along the way.
Yeah. And then driving out to, that was after. So at that point, I think it was probably like 4. Because then I went to residency out in California. So we drove out there, and me and my dad stopped at Nebraska's High Point. So one high point because my cat was in the car. So my cat at the time, Milo, actually has one high point. It's Nebraska.
That's cool.
We stopped in Rocky Mountain National Park. So my dad's part of the Chicago Mountaineering Club. And they have like a cabin you can rent out there. And so we left the cat there and we did some hiking there. We might have previously had done Elbert at that point. But that trip we didn't. We just hiked around Rocky Mountain National Park and then continued on to Southern California.
Yeah, that's beautiful out there. Where in California were you living?
I was in Loma Linda. I was living in Redlands and then also Riverside towards the end of my residency.
Okay. Did you enjoy any of those Southern California peaks like San Gorgonio or San Jacinto?
We went up Mount Baldy, which I think, has another name, but I can't remember what the other name was. And I really actually loved that. And then me and one of my friends went hiking up there. I don't think we actually went up a peak, but we saw a big mountain goat with like the giant horns. We're like, that's a big animal. we're gonna give some space.
I didn't know those were in California, in Southern California.
I didn't either until we saw this like big creature and we're like, wow, very awesome, but we're gonna give you some space, buddy.
Yeah. I went to San Gorgonio once, and I brought this, it was the first time I had ever used a bear canister, because I didn't know what the likelihood would have been of me seeing a bear, but I thought, they put it on their flag, I should probably just expect it.
Yeah.
And that thing was so heavy, and I put it in my back as I was going up, and I slept on the mountain too. It was so beautiful. Didn't need it, and I remember talking to one of those the campground rangers, and he's like, no, you just wasted so much space in your bag.
Wasted space, weight, all of the above.
Everything.
We had that.
Have one.
Yeah, we have a bear vault too, because they recommended it for like doing the Grand Canyon. So me, my dad, and brother did the Grand Canyon rim to rim. Oh, and then we stopped, so we decided to do North Rim to South Rim because the North Rim's higher. So you go down more than you go up. But we stopped in the ranger station to pick up like our permit. He's like, yeah, you don't need those. Like we took a like car over there, so we're like, well, I guess we're carrying it anyway.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, you can leave them here. We'll use them.
Yeah, I think the animals around the Grand Canyon know where people are and things like that.
Yeah.
I remember going up to the South Rim a year ago and seeing the squirrels up there, and they walk up to
Yes.
you,
Yes.
and they have this expectation of like, all right, you're going to feed me, right? And then you look at them, and they're just the size of a little dog.
Yes.
You're like, wow, you're so spoiled up here.
Yeah, my brother down at the Phantom Ranch, I was sitting in the river. My brother was laying under the picnic table, and he's like, I felt like something was watching me, and he turns, and there's a squirrel, like right here just looking at him. And he's like, oh, hi, I have nothing for you.
Yeah, they're pretty fearless. It's like I was on Wheeler Peak a couple years ago, and at the summit there were these little like chipmunks or something up there.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe it was another critter, but they acted the same way. Like they came up to me and just waited. Like everyone else feeds us, so you will too, right?
Like, excuse me, I'm hungry.
While you were in residency in California, did you summit Mount Whitney then?
I summited it after. So me and my dad both entered the lottery for, so I finished residency like end of June. And then between the two of us, I can't remember if it was me or if it was him, got the better date. So we just went with that one. And so I left California. So it was very beginning of July. And my brother flew out, and then actually my cousin, she was out at UC Davis at the time, so she drove down to Summit with us. So it was actually like I was in like the worst shape of my life because I just finished residency, like, but still, you know, that one's got a nice trail at the top, so you just kind of drag yourself one footstep at a time.
So you did the John Muir Trail up?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what it was. It was the one from the Whitney portal with the most delicious, like that they have that little shop at the bottom and you can smell the fries. Oh,
it's amazing when you're coming down. So you did the 99 switchbacks route.
Yeah, whatever number it was. It was.
Yeah, that's what everyone says. I always wonder, I'm like, is it 99? And they're like, I stopped counting.
Yeah, I know. It's too many. But it was, you know, it was beautiful. I remember, too, there was a couple that went up there, and they had never put up their tent, and they were trying to figure out, like what to do with the fly. And then, like, finally some other guy took pity upon them and came over and helped them set it up. Oh, it was so cute.
That's not an ideal time to figure out how your gear works. But
No.
So let's talk about some of the memorable peaks that you've done on the East Coast.
So I loved Katahdin. We ended up getting like campsite out there. So we actually did Katahdin twice while we were out there. So first we did it kind of from like the back way, not the Appalachian Trail or Appalachian Trail, depending on who you talk to. And then like we were out there and just like seeing everything and decided we're like, hey, let's do the Appalachian Trail then. Because the first day when we went up too, it was super foggy. So then we went back and it was a beautiful day. You could see everything for miles.
Wow.
Marcy was also like, I think Marcy's kind of like a surprise challenge because it's so long. You don't expect it to be so long. And then like me and my dad, so I initially attempted, I think it was in May because I had I have a friend in like Syracuse area and she was having a baby shower. And so I went out and visited with her and then I went up and I had to catch a flight that night. So then like I got to within a mile of the summit, but I was like, my flight's not going to wait for me. So I got to turn around and go. But me and my dad went back in November, which I actually think was like, and then like parts of the trail are submerged and you're like, what's with this trail? And we took my dogs too, and they did pretty good on it. And No bugs though, because it was November. So at least there's
Sure.
that.
How long did it take you guys?
I don't. So we ended up. We went a little ways in to where the dam used to be and camped, and then left most of our stuff there. Went up and summited and came back down. We were coming down in the dark, so it took us a while, at least 14 hours probably.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like you don't expect it to like take that long, but then it does. You know. I also when me and my dad were out there, we also did Mount Mansfield in Vermont. It was raining the whole time, so we ended up leaving both of the dogs in the car. But what's memorable about that is like going from New York to Vermont, you cross like whatever river that is, and we were on like some ferry boat, and like the waves like crash over you. You're like, oh my God, I'm gonna die on this boat. And we were like, and there's like, because it was November, the ski lift wasn't running, but like we saw like a lift going. We're like, oh great, it's running, except it was just the lift going from the parking lot to the lodge, and you're like, oh, I guess we'll hike the whole thing.
Did you guys do Mount Washington in that same trip?
No, that was a different trip, and we took the cog train up. I know some people get picky about you have to hike it. I'm not picky. If I get to take a train up to the top of a mountain, I'm going to take a train up to the top of a mountain.
Was it a cool experience?
Yeah, no, the train is super cool. Mount Washington was pretty cool itself, and so I personally loved the cog train. I recommend the cog train.
Yeah. No, you're right. Some people are very picky about how it needs to be done, if it's a true high point attempt or whatever. You know, I think as long as you're not going for any record, just do it your way and have fun.
Right. Texas was a fun hike. We ended up flying out there, and then we went to Carlsbad Caverns too.
Yeah.
Which is out there. I also actually really loved Alabama's Chiaja. It's like on like, you know, they've got like a state park there, and I think when I was there was like some sort of like 5K or 10K going on at the same time. It was just a really like pretty spot. You know, I think that's probably those two in the South. That Florida was very, very Florida. You know, I think I was there in the middle of the night. You drive through 8 million miles of Alabama and finally get to Florida, and you see the monument, and you're like, great. Moving on.
So when did you start to do high points on your own?
It was after residency. So we did Whitney, and then from there we actually went and did Boundary because we were really close. So hey, cricket, stop. Sorry. Okay. So yeah, we ended up doing Boundary from there. And actually, some people have a lot of trouble with Boundary, but like we thought Boundary was actually just a delightful peak. And then my brother ended up flying back, and me and my dad went and did Bora Peak. That one's definitely a bear. And then it was after that, you know, there was a certain point where I decided to just take a road trip and do all the southern high points. So I did like Missouri, Arkansas, Louisiana, Florida, Alabama, Indiana, Ohio, all in like a 4-day stretch. It was like marathon.
Wow. So did you ever do more than one peak in a day?
Yeah, on that trip I did. And then me and my dad went and did kind of like, some of them are considered east, some of them are considered south. So like Pennsylvania, West Virginia, North and South Carolina. We did some of those multiples in a day just because you're mostly driving to them, that type of thing.
Mm-hmm. So how long have you been a member of the Highpointers Club?
Probably like 5 years now.
Okay. Were you a 50 state high pointer when you joined?
No, I hadn't completed then. So I think it was partially that I was getting closer to completing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's part of the reason why I joined. So I've been to 2 conventions. So I went to the one in Michigan, which was in 2019 before the pandemic. And it really varies convention to convention because the host can do kind of whatever they want. So in there it was they rented out this like big hall and then had like a family style meal, and like it was just a lot of fun. What was a lot of fun also was voting on where the next spot was going to be. With the conventions, like it's just a lot of people, and I think I really liked it because it was everybody just talking about high pointing, talking about climbing. Like there wasn't, people didn't get into like anything else but climbing. You got to meet, so like the first convention I went to, I got to meet Don Holmes, who, wrote one of the high pointing books, and a lot of the like stuff like that. And then the last convention was so that one was in like a big convention hall called the Whirligig up in northern Michigan. This last convention that we had was in Pennsylvania, and it was at like there was like a hotel and convention center. They normally do, like, you can tell they're like a ski resort, but it was during the summer, so I think that's why they had a lot of space. So it was actually, I thought it was a very nice convention. The Birds put it on. Mark Bird and his son Garrett Bird were the people who really organized it, and I thought they honestly did a really fantastic job.
Mm-hmm. And so is summiting that state's high point part of the convention?
Yeah, typically wherever the convention is, they'll typically do a trip to the high point, and then one of Mark Comstock, his late wife, so I think she died of cancer. She used to bring a bunch of watermelons to the high point, so that's what they do is every year they bring watermelons to the high point, cut them up, and have a watermelon feast.
I was wondering where that came from. I had a guest on the podcast, James was his name. He's a photographer, and he features some of his work at the conventions, and he mentioned that it was a tradition to have watermelon.
They've had high points, like they've gone out to Montana before, where they don't have the watermelon feast on the high point because nobody wants to drag a watermelon to the summit of Granite Peak, but they do it like somewhere close by. But like someplace like Pennsylvania, you can drive to the high point. So whenever they can, they do that.
That's nice. Wow. So will we see you at this year's convention in Georgia?
Yes, I will be there.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're also on the board of the Highpointers Club. So when did that happen, and what's your role right now?
So initially I started, I want to say it was in, so it was in the fall of 2021, they had put into the newsletter that they were looking for somebody to run their mercantile. Which is like their little store with stuff. And I thought, and at that point I was like, you know what, I would love to get involved. So I emailed the president and was like, hey, I could do this, if you're interested. And I ended up going, picking up all this stuff and organizing it, all that kind of stuff, and getting it together. And then I think, so it was last year around this time that they were calling for nominations. And I had worked, so Don Holmes resigned from the board, but he was part of the board, and he was the treasurer. So I had worked a lot with him, setting up a bank account, doing the accounting for the Merc and the club and stuff like that. And he actually nominated me for the board. And that's how I ended up on the board. We're always looking for more people to get involved. I think we're going to put more on, hopefully going forward, we're going to put more on social media, and I'm going to start trying to reach out to more people because I really would like to, I think there was a core group of people that were part of the club for a long time. But I really want to get like new people with new ideas involved, like the Toms who took over the newsletter. Yeah. The way they got involved was they ended up sitting at my table at the convention. And then we ended up talking afterwards, and I took Tom's phone number. And then when we were having trouble with the newsletter, I reached out to him. I was like, hey, you mentioned you guys were interested in the newsletter. I need a newsletter editor. So, we're really looking for more people to get involved, and we just, hopefully I can start reaching out to more people and getting like more energy in the club.
Yeah, and they've done a great job with the newsletter.
Fantastic. That, like, I got that news. I was like, this is amazing. So I'm so excited to have them involved.
So you finished your 50-state highpointing journey with Denali, as most people do. Now, can you talk about that expedition? Did you do it by yourself? When did you summit?
So I actually had 3 attempts on Denali. So initially I wasn't planning for it to be my final high point. I was initially planning Hawaii to be my final high point, but I got sick on the mountain, and I got probably a mild case of HAVE. I had trouble breathing, had trouble coming down. I went back the next year, and then that next year I had kind of like, and I think I had some PTSD from the year before, to be honest with you. And then I ended up like pulling my leg, and I think I just didn't quite get my fitness right. So I ended up turning around that time. So the last time, we were actually initially supposed to go in 2020, but then the world shut down. And me and actually my friend who is on Everest now, and I took Everest Base Camp trek with her, me and her did a private trip with Vern Tejas. He's a guide through Alpine Ascents, and he's very well known on the mountain because he summited, I think it was his 60th summit with us.
Wow.
So he, we were on the mountain a long time. We spent 26 days on the mountain, and we spent 9 days at high camp at 17. And like up at 17, we were basically just waiting for weather, but like Vern would go out and be like, yeah, no, weather's going to change. And actually the day before we summited, we had a really bad windstorm up there. So bad that we kind of thought, I think Vern actually assumed that eventually our tent would fly off. So he was outside of the tent shoveling snow while me and Deb, my friend, and the other guide were holding up the poles. 2 poles broke during that storm, and he fixed them from the outside. And we were, at that point, we were up on that mountain for a long time. And then we got a bad weather report that night. It was supposed to be 40 mile per hour winds, 17 to the summit. So we actually thought we were going down the next day because I was just out of time. I had to go back home. I had to work. The other guide, Ari, she had to literally like turn around and get back, fly back onto Denali with another trip. But then we woke up that morning, and like there was like no wind. There was some wind on the upper mountain, but like it was a beautiful, perfect summit day. So I think it was like a 14-hour summit day, so it was a little bit long, but it was like I think it was just utterly glorious because it had been so long and we had spent so much time on that mountain. You read about all these things, like you read about Zebra Rocks, Archdeacon's Tower, Pig Hill, and then you're like, oh my God, there it is. So it was a beautiful summit day. We ended up I ended up kind of destroying my feet on the way out because the next day we went down to 14. We stayed, and then what we didn't realize is with COVID, they had reduced the number of hours that they were flying back and forth from base camp. So we had a limited amount of time to get from 14 down to base camp to fly out because weather was coming in the next day. And we were like, we have to get off this mountain. So we made it, but then like I think for the next week after I flew home, I wore my dad's tennis shoes, which are like 2 sizes bigger than my shoe size, just because my feet were swollen and angry. But it was worth it. Like sometimes those mountains just crawl into your brain, and you have to summit them to move on with your life. And Denali for me was one of those.
Mm-hmm. So what was the biggest difference you noticed in yourself between the first two attempts and the last attempt?
I think the last attempt I was just so ready. I had trained so hard. I was so ready. I remember even like mentally, physically, all of the above, I was just ready to climb the mountain. And I remember even the night before we summited, when we thought we were going down, I remember sitting there thinking like, fine, I'll come back. You want me to come back, I'll come back, but I'm going to climb. So I think that's just, I think finally, and I think it's kind of also just mentally believing in yourself, knowing you can climb this mountain. Like at that point, at that moment there, like I knew I could climb it. I just needed the opportunity. It was beautiful. We went up and I remember getting to Denali Pass and there was no wind at that point. There was some wind up on the final summit ridge. I just remember like we crossed the football field and we got to the base of Pig Hill and I was like, this is it. This is like 600 feet and then we're there. And then we got to the top and it was absolutely beautiful. It was a beautiful day. It was clear. It was windy and cold, so I didn't take as many pictures as I would have liked, but it was absolutely gorgeous.
And that was May of 2022?
2021.
Okay. Wow. Well, congratulations. That's amazing. And as I mentioned earlier in the episode, you just returned from an Everest Base Camp trek. How was that?
Yes. It was absolutely lovely. I love Nepal. So what I ended up doing, so my friend is still there. She's actually on the mountain right now on her summit attempt for Everest.
Wow.
Yeah, so because she was, and she's who I climbed Denali with. She's a 7 summits person, so she's done 6 of the 7. Everest would be her 7th.
Wow.
And she mentioned to me that she was going, and I always wanted to do Everest Base Camp, and I was like, it'd be really cool if I could do Everest Base Camp with you. And she's like, oh my God, I would love that. She finally decided on what company she was going with, and she ended up going with Madison Mountaineering, and they're one of the companies that actually, if you go to Everest Base Camp at the same time, you get to hike with the climbers. So for Denali and for training course that I did on Baker, I went with Alpine Ascents, but they have separate Everest Base Camp treks than their people climbing Everest. So this was kind of like a unique opportunity to be able to hike up with her. And I love Nepal. I loved the Khumbu Valley that you hike through. It's absolutely beautiful. The people there are so lovely, so nice. Our guides were great. Madison Mountaineering, I thought they were really good. I felt good leaving my friend in their care, that they were going to take care of her, make sure she was safe, that type of stuff. So I highly recommend.
I follow Madison Mountaineering on Facebook, and they have been posting pictures of the Everest team's progress so far. And I know that between today and yesterday, a lot of people are doing their summit bids, and it's just so exciting to watch.
Yeah. And I wish I could know exactly where she was on the mountain, but, I'm just, so there's another guy who has his Garmin GPS track. So I've been following him. I'm following like all the other people that we went up there with. I'm following their Facebook, their Instagram, and, just thinking good thoughts for them. Because I know like it's pretty late this year because there were winds so high up for so long. So they got delayed in their summit attempts this year.
Okay. So is that next for you? Do you want to try any international summits, 7 of them, maybe?
So, probably not. So I knew going up there that there was a chance that I'd look at Everest and be like, oh my God, I got to climb that. And I think Everest is one of those ones where if you decide to climb it, it really does have to be like something that you have to do all consuming, because it is, no matter how safe you are, there is a serious real risk of death on Everest. And I went up there and I love the valley. I want to go back. I might volunteer at one of the clinics up there because they have volunteer clinics for climbers and hikers and Sherpas. So they have the Himalayan Rescue Association has, I think, 3 clinics up there that they run for climbers and Sherpas and locals. I would also consider climbing some of the smaller peaks, maybe. But I didn't go up there and feel like I had to climb those mountains. I just went out there and like loved the valley and would love to go back.
Yeah, I've heard people say the same thing about Everest Base Camp track. They're like, I didn't know it would be that beautiful.
Yeah.
Are there any books or documentaries or podcasts about climbing or mountains that you enjoy?
So, I like a lot of the climbing videos that or the movies that like Jimmy Chin did. So like Meru,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
like
Oh, I
a
like that one
really
too.
yeah, there's like a really magical moment. It's towards the beginning, so they're at the close to the top, but they know they're going to turn around, and then Jimmy Chin turns to the camera and goes, "I'm never coming back." I'm like, I know that moment, because of course he comes back. That's the whole movie.
Yeah.
I it like Netflix also had The Alpinist, which I think was a
Oh,
very
that was fantastic.
very fantastic, but also very sobering movie.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it was
Um,
one of those climbing documentaries that doesn't have the happy ending on the
yeah.
summit with high fives or anything like that. It was very real.
Yeah. So those are the two that stand out to me right now. It's mostly just like, and I've watched, there's some documentaries about like there was a day on K2 where like 12 people died, and it was interesting
Yeah.
to listen to that because like, people like the one woman was like, people say like, somebody died, why didn't you turn around? She's like, well, if you're driving on the highway and you see a car accident, you don't stop driving. You weren't involved in the accident. So, I mean, I'll watch a lot of like those type of things. I picked up the 14ers now that I finished the 50. So I
Cool. Okay.
do go to like 14ers.com. Sometimes that guy has a lot of good information about
Yeah.
the hikes and stuff. And, that's more of like for like the 50 state high points was like an obsession. And now this is more like a hobby starting out. So,
How has high pointing changed your life and how has it affected you on a personal level?
so I think for me, the mountains are a place that I can go to and be at peace. My job can be really stressful and really hard. And, just like I went to Nepal for, like 2.5 weeks and came back and just felt different. Like, so I think for me, the mountains are just really important as like a reset, as just going out and I think there's something different about being out in nature, just being out in the woods and just hiking and not worrying about anything but putting one foot in front of the other. That's so healing mentally for me. So, I mean, I can't imagine my life without mountains, without climbing.